Services for Niagara Bottling, and welcome to our hydration, health, and wellness session. I'm going to kick off the session this morning and talk about some of the basics of bottled water processing and analytical analysis, and then I'm going to hand off to our speakers, Dr. Coleen, Muños, and Elizabeth Pender. So I'm going to start. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, and we will answer those at the end of the session. So to start, the bottled water industry, we are regulated by the FDA, and it's not advancing, sorry. I'll just keep talking. So we're actually regulated by the FDA. Our analytical parameters are based on the Safe Drinking Water Act, which is through EPA. And the FDA took that and refined some of the MCLs, the maximum contaminant limits. And therefore, that's where our actual regulations come from. So initially, when I first got into the bottled water industry, there was no federal regulations. I've been in bottled water for a long time, 35 years, actually. So the regulations were coming from the states. So at that time, that did create some inconsistencies. And as a result, thankfully, we have our association, the International Bottled Water Association, IBWA, that helped to facilitate the federal regulations that we see actually today with the FDA and the states. Initially, each state had a different definition of what a spring was. A spring in North Carolina was not the same as a spring in Texas, or not the same as a spring in the state of New York. So it did create a lot of confusion, labeling issues, and so on and so forth. But we are regulated as a food by the FDA. So just some bottled water basics. You hear the terms purified water. Purified water is water that's purified by reverse osmosis. It is also a USP grade, a US Pharmacopoeia grade purified water. Some other types of purified water would be a distilled water. You also see in our industry that we have purified water with minerals added for taste. But in order to put that label, purified water, on the label, we have to meet the definition of the USP definition for purified water. Natural waters would include waters that are minimal treatment, and it's actually just filtering and disinfection with ozone, and that is it. So that would be spring water, well water, mineral water, artesian water, which is a type of well water that comes naturally to the surface on its own. So that's the basics on the waters that we produce. So to start with, at Niagara Bottling, no two source is the same. So we have developed a water treatment process to be able to handle what we are receiving, whether that is a well water that we're using or a city water supply. Majority of our plants, like most in the bottled water industry, are using a municipal water supply. So based on the contaminant or the things that we're trying to remove, then we have different parts of the process. So initially it would be the filtration, which is part of the pre-treatment, ultraviolet light, carbon, which removes the chlorine and certain other organic contaminants, and reverse osmosis is what actually is a water purification step, and then ozone is the disinfection step. So you'll notice that with PFAS, the forever chemicals that have been in the news a lot, basically it's a combination of carbon, but predominantly the reverse osmosis that ensures that those are adequately removed. So the first part of our process is mechanical filtration, and then the second step would be carbon. So carbon is removing the chlorine, also some of the organics that might be present, part of the PFAS if they actually are present. We also, in the bottled water industry, the regulations are not the same analytically across all the states. So for example, the trihalomethanes, which are a disinfection byproduct, the maximum is 10 parts per billion in the state of California. So therefore, we must manage our process to that. The federal limit for those on the municipal water side is 80 parts per billion. So as a result, we regenerate, we steam our carbon about once a week, and we do all that analytical testing in-house to ensure that we stay within those limits, so that when our water goes across state lines, there's no issues, whether it's in Texas or whether it's in California. So this is reverse osmosis. Our average RO here at Niagara Bottling is about 500 gallons per minute. So our average plant has about 2 to 4 ROs, depends on the size of production volume. This is a cross section of the RO membrane. This is where the majority of the purification process actually happens. It removes up to 98 to 100% of the dissolved organic contaminants. Smaller molecules like the trihalomethanes that I was speaking about, which are disinfection byproducts, are actually removed from the carb. This is a picture of a mineral skid. So you'll see frequently minerals added for taste on the purified water labels. So the minerals are injected, a mixture of natural mineral salts, depends on the formula that our customer has, are injected in line on the fly toward the filler to a target total dissolved solids content. Then the water is disinfected with ozone. Ozone is GRAS, considered GRAS by FDA, which means it's generally recognized as safe. And we inject ozone at 0.1 to 0.4 milligrams per liter in the finished product at the time of bottling, as per requirement by the FDA. The ozone actually does stay in the product. It's temperature dependent. If it's cold, it might be in there for usually somewhere around about 3 hours to 12 hours, but it depends on the temperature of the water, the residual. So at Niagara Bottling, not unlike multiple other bottlers across the U.S., as well as municipal water supplies, we have inline monitors that monitor certain water quality parameters on the fly. This data is actually tied to the filler, and in the event that we have any out of spec situations, it actually does shut the filler down. And we track the trends, whether that is the TDS, the total dissolved solid, the ozone level, the pH, so on and so forth. Now moving on to spring water. So spring water, we have licensed geologists on staff. It is an actual, I would say, a niche part of the business. You'll see bottlers that are almost all spring water, and then you'll see bottlers like Niagara that do a mix of purified and spring. We actually bottle spring water at about half of our production locations across Niagara. We manage over 40 spring sites. We have licensed geologists on site, and we have to ensure that the spring site actually meets FDA's definition of a spring. So it takes a lot of analysis up front to get it approved, ensured. You can't just check the water once. And would it be the same in March that it is in October? What's the flow rate? So on and so forth. So it takes 1, sometimes 2 years to take a natural spring site to the point that it's ready for production. This is a picture of a spring site in Georgia. This is what they typically look like. This is an installation of a test well. So what we'll do is we'll put in a test well and ensure that that well is hydraulically connected to the spring site, and analytically those waters are the same. And then from that point on, we can pull our product water from the test well. Some spring sites, going back several years, in the bottled water history, majority of the spring sites were done with catchments. That's basically a tank that you put down in the ground. There's no bottom, sits on a gravel bed, and then you pull the water naturally flows to the surface, and it ends up looking like this. This is the inside of the spring house, and then you're actually pulling water from that catchment right there inside the spring house. This is a spring loadout station. This is where the trucks go. The bulk spring water is actually transported to the bottling facilities in water dedicated stainless tankers, very similar to the way you would see milk tankers handled. They're all food grade, safety seals are put in place. They actually have to go through a kosher wash because we have kosher bottling facilities as well too. And we do an inspection upon receipt to ensure that the water meets our standards and everything prior to unloading. So depending on the production volume, you know, a plant may see 15 to 16 tankers a day. We have some in the northeastern United States that go up to 75 to 100 tankers in one day during the summer months. This is just an overview of the labs that we have at corporate QA at Niagara. So we have a packaging lab. We have a corporate license micro lab that's located in Milesburg, Pennsylvania, that conducts the weekly micros. We have a corporate lab in Athens that does more of the beverage R&D type micros. And we have a corporate lab here in Diamond Bar, California that manages and conducts more of the analytical chemistry side. And we also use outside laboratories for the permitting and analytical analysis as well. We're limited in the bottled water industry as to who we can use from an outside analytical laboratory standpoint, because the actual licensing of the labs are licensed by state. So that means that you'll hear us saying in the industry, 50 state compliance. So that means that just because you're licensed in the state of Pennsylvania does not mean that your water can be sold in the state of New York unless you have all the appropriate licenses. So the plant is licensed, the tankers are licensed individually, and the labs are licensed by method number. This is a summary of the analytical analysis that we do over a course of a year. So it includes all the volatile organics, the semi-volatile organics, which are done by an outside licensed laboratory. We have, there's only one lab in the whole world that has all of the necessary state licenses. Believe it or not, we have a choice of 3 labs. Thankfully, those 3 are in the United States, but 2 of those don't have all the analytical parameters, maybe radiologicals or something like that. So you have to use a combination of labs. In 2019, we started doing the PFAS analysis. We do the source and the finished product annually, and that was started as a member of IBWA. And this is just a little fun thing that I wanted to show. In our business, we do beverage analysis. We also do a lot of water analysis, but many of you on the municipal water side, you end up with an off taste or an off odor issue, and you give a sample to somebody and say, this tastes wrong, this tastes terrible, don't you taste that? And then other people taste it and they don't smell or taste anything. We actually have a gas chromatograph, a GC mass spec that is a headspace analyzer that actually analyzes for those type odors. So very interesting new instrument that we've been running just recently in our corporate lab. So, and that is it. So if you have any questions or anything, please put them in the chat. And then now I am going to hand this off to Dr. Coleen Muños. She is an associate professor with health sciences at the University of Hartford and serves as the director of Hydration Health Center. Dr. Muños has conducted extensive research focused on investigating hydration philosophy, biomarkers, perception, and related behavior since 2008, and has effectively translated and disseminated this dedication through authorizing over 30 peer-reviewed publications in the field of hydration science. So I'm going to hand this over to Dr. Muños. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. And I do apologize. I'm not sure if somebody's advancing the slides for me, so I'll just say advance when we're ready. Just a second.
Hang on just a second.
Sure.
Just a minute.
Yeah, yes. I stopped by the cocktail. Yeah. Plus I was, my voice towards the end of the day too. Came back. You've, stayed down to later. Get a little bit of a nice weather here. Great. How many?
Few technical difficulties, almost ready.
Yeah.
Colleen, can you run your presentation from your side?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay. Awesome, thank you.
Not a problem. Okay, can you see the slides?
Yes, we can.
Okay, you don't see the presenter view, right? You see what you should be seeing?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. Sometimes that happens when you have multiple screens set up. Okay, well, thank you so much for, again, the invitation. And as mentioned, I'm going to be talking about really the importance of hydration and health and what we know about this already, and really how those of us involved with the Hydration Health Center are looking to tackle this big issue. Okay, let's see. So I know this is not news to anybody probably in this room, but we have a big issue with the awareness of and the messaging that is, especially from a public health standpoint, of the importance of water, and particularly when we see from our governmental imagery to help identify what we should be eating on a daily basis, that water is nowhere found on this graphic. And so while there's a little bit of commentary when you look at the, some of the language around this graphic, water is mentioned, but it's simply not enough. Most of the things seen on this figure, we could go days, weeks, maybe even months without eating, but we really only have a few days without water. So we know that this is important, but I think that's one of the problems, is that a lot of, historically speaking, a lot of medical professionals, et cetera, have always said, oh yeah, water is important. But I think that's also lent itself to us not studying it to the same extent that we do many other nutrients and many other aspects of health. So we do know that water makes an impact on our health. And this is really just the short list. And to be honest, this is a list that I'm comfortable presenting you today based on the amount of science we currently have to substantiate these claims. But those of us in the hydration science field are well aware that this list is absolutely going to grow. And to be honest, we still need a little bit more support even for the things that we see on this list. So we know that water makes a difference when it comes to our overall health. And so when we think about how our body functions and really outcomes, we would call them, whether they're short-term or long-term health outcomes, we know that water intake plays a role with the development of kidney stones. And for anybody who's ever had one or known anybody that's had one, you want to avoid that. We also know that urinary tract infections are on this list. And this is a funny one because this is one where clinicians have for decades told people drink more water to avoid urinary tract infections. But really, we've only had appropriate science to support this over the last 5 to 10 years. Now, what's particularly exciting for a lot of us is the relationship that is unfolding with water intake and cardiometabolic diseases. So as the first part of that word suggests, it's related to the cardiovascular system and how well it functions, but also various metabolic processes. So how we break down food, how we make energy, how we also manage the byproducts of all of those processes. So this includes things like diabetes, and that's one that we're starting to realize that low water intake does induce hyperglycemia. So it does add sugar to the blood. So this is obviously a big concern, especially when we think about the number of people who are affected by type 2 diabetes in this country and others. Chronic kidney disease is also on that list, and particularly variations of that. And chronic kidney disease is actually the one that allowed us to really start seeing, oh, we probably need to be taking in more water than everybody once thought. And I'll get back to that story in just a minute. Now, we also know that water intake influences our performance. And when I say performance, I mean both performance of our brain and performance of our bodies. So we already have information to show that ample water intake helps our brain function in terms of memory and attention and things along those lines. Oh, also our mood states. We also know that there's a lot of physical function ramifications of low water intake. So without drinking enough water, we know that we don't perform well from an athletic perspective, from a cardiovascular perspective, so on and so forth. It also makes us feel like we're working harder than we otherwise would feel if we were well hydrated. So if you ever have one of those exercise bouts where it just feels a little bit more difficult, it could be due to your hydration status. And then lastly, we know that there are a host of things related to heat-related illnesses that hydration is related to, and particularly when we start seeing things like heat stroke, which is absolutely life-threatening. So this does suggest that we know how much water we should be drinking, but for those of you who probably already know this story, we don't. We really don't know how much water we should be drinking. There are some world organizations seen on the screen here who have put forth recommendations that do have scientific backing, but not nearly enough. And so hopefully you're also looking at these numbers and saying they're different from one another. I mean, in as much as with men, the difference is over a liter a day. And that's a lot considering this scale only goes up to, 3.5 liters or so. So we know that there are differences based on sex, women versus men, but that's also a little bit of an overstatement. It's really body size and a host of other things. And so the point being, and as we're going to see in some additional messaging in the upcoming slides, we really don't have an understanding of this. And there's also not a one size fits all where we can tell everybody across the board that this is how much you should be drinking. So what we can say is that when we look at these recommendations, that 2 liters a day, which is the lowest recommendation that we're seeing on the screen, is about 8.5 8-ounce glasses of water a day. So, that's on the small end of things. We're probably starting to see now that people should be shooting for at least that much, but probably a little bit more. So why is this so hard to answer? Why do we not know these, how to address these questions? And so one of the issues is that body water balance and the physiology of hydration is complex, highly complex and dynamic. It involves a lot of different physiological systems, a lot of different organs and processes. So first of all, we know that one factor here is that it's a balance. So we know that there are various inputs like beverages, whether that's plain water, coffee, tea, juice, etc. We also do get some water from food. And for most countries, and this is variable based on culture and based on the time of year, but we do get about 20% of our total water intake from foods, things like vegetables, fruits, soup, yogurt, etc. We also do make a little bit of water, and this is normally only a relevant amount if we're talking about somebody who is exercising a lot on a daily basis. Now, there's plenty of ways that we can get rid of water, of course. So we do lose a small amount through fecal and respiratory losses. But most of our losses come from sweat, which could be not only due to physical activity, but also just being in a warm environment. And also our urine output, which is normally related to how much water we're taking in, but it can be influenced by various conditions and various medications. But this isn't the whole story of why this is a complex situation. And don't worry, we're not going to go through all the details here. I'm showing you this slide to attempt to highlight, at least in part, the complexity of what's going on in the body. So our brain is paying attention to a variety of things like you see in the middle, like our plasma volume, osmolality, which is the concentration of our blood, etc. And we have a ton of different mechanisms to control getting back to this midpoint, if you will, this set point. So we have processes when we're in a water deficit. We have processes when we're in a water excess. And these are only a small amount of the processes, but just to show you part of the complexity here. Now, because of what we're seeing here, there's many of us in the field, and particularly those of us who are involved in the Hydration Health Center, that realize that this is sounding familiar to a lot of other situations that we see in health and healthcare. That, for example, type 2 diabetes is a great example of this, where we see over time this is something that develops. It's not overnight. And a lot of times we don't even know that it's happening along the way. And we do have systems that control for sugar in our blood when we add some, sugar to our diets. And similarly, we do have a lot of systems that manage periods of low water intake or high water intake. However, like diabetes, we believe that if these systems are actively used over a long period of time, that does add a lot of stress to them. And over time, they're likely to burn out or at least not function to the same extent that they once did. So this is definitely one aspect of the issue of not understanding how much water we should be drinking, the simple complexity of how we manage water intake. But another factor is just being able to monitor someone's hydration status and saying whether or not somebody is in balance. And especially important because not everybody should be intaking the same amount every day. So being able to identify if somebody's in balance could be really helpful. And to be honest, we do not have a gold standard metric of measuring hydration status that's applicable across all contexts. So what we tend to do is kind of throw the kitchen sink at people, and we look at a lot of things: blood concentration, urine concentration, hormones. We do have some ways of measuring total body water, and we can also look at body mass loss if it's a controlled environment. But we also recognize that these are probably not the only important factors, and there's some that we're likely not looking at either at all or sufficiently right now in scientific experiments. And we also need to start figuring out which ones of these are particularly important under certain circumstances. So we have some issues here. We know that water is an essential nutrient, meaning we need to take it in our diet. It's not something we can rely on not taking in our diet. And this is starting to ask the questions too of what are the long-term health effects? And we've already seen some of those, as I mentioned in the beginning of this presentation. We also need to be able to profile adequate hydration, and we're not really sure what that looks like entirely, especially in not only healthy people, but unhealthy people, various age groups, etc. So we need to be able to monitor daily hydration practices and whether or not we're drinking enough. But we also need to pay attention to rehydrating after losses. So what I showed you earlier, that we should be drinking at least 2 liters a day, we need to be drinking more than that if we have additional losses as well. So if we're sweating for any reason. And lastly, we also need to better understand determinants of hydration behaviors. What are the attitudes and the beliefs? What make it so that somebody actually doesn't drink enough on a daily basis, or perhaps even drinks too much? So all of these issues remain elusive, including how much should we be drinking? This is not a one size fits all. And we know we need a lot more science to back these things up. That's the only way we're ever going to answer these questions. So we need scientific investigations with novel, encompassing, and advanced methodology. And that's something that we're really tackling with the Hydration Health Center, which I'll describe further. So on a bigger picture scale, kind of thinking from a public health standpoint, why is this important? We spend a tremendous amount of money on healthcare expenditures, especially in the United States, but all across the world. And a lot of these are on chronic and mental health conditions. And of those conditions, a significant portion of this funding is going towards those conditions that are preventable. So that is something that should be a big target of all of ours, something that can not only save ourselves in terms of the economic challenges related to our healthcare, but also just for our lifespan and quality of life. So we believe that water intake, the simple, cost-effective act of drinking more water, is a viable solution to a lot of these problems. It is part of the risk profile associated with a lot of preventable conditions. So that's really what started the Hydration Health Center on the campus of the University of Hartford in Connecticut. And so there's a host of us that are involved in this work, and we realize we need to take different approaches to this. And so we are trying to really do this in an encompassing and novel way, as I mentioned. We're looking to collect lots of data. We're looking to store these data in a really organized and useful way, not only for ourselves, but our collaborators. And we're also using advanced analytics. And that's probably one of the most exciting things about what we're doing, and also including lots of collaborators from different fields to more encompassingly address these important public health questions. So just to kind of skip to the chase and showing you how we go about this in our novel and encompassing way, we use this graphic to help guide our research. And so if you look inside the water drop, we have things like omics. So that's kind of a broad term for genomics, transcriptomics, all these things from a really molecular level, small scale stuff that can tell us what predispositions people have, how they're unique, how water intake plays a role in their health. But we're also looking at other levels of science, proteins, networks of organs, et cetera. And we're using advanced analytics like artificial intelligence and machine learning to answer these questions, because if we don't, we're getting reductionist and siloed and really going down the same paths that we have for decades, which have gotten us somewhere, but not as far as we need to be in this question. So eventually what we hope to get are ways that we can diagnose people for insufficient water intake, where we can start having clinical metrics and informed models that tell us whether or not somebody is at risk for certain conditions, sort of a decision-making tree, if you. And lastly, we will understand metadata, so which is essentially data about data. How can we learn more about the complex relationships and the dynamic aspect of hydration, and really using all of the tools in our disposal to answer these questions? So this obviously takes a big team of people. We're already starting to develop our small internal team here of the people you see on this list. And just with respect of time, I'm going to kind of skip forward, because though I love these people and they're tremendous to this effort, we have some bigger conversations to be had. So really, that is one of the aspects, I think, of the hydration science that has been limited, is not having a broad enough network. And so this is not only researchers in similar, but also tangential fields, which we have been doing not only internally on our campus, but also with other institutions. Things like bringing on psychology folks, bringing in people from computing sciences, bringing in people from communications and marketing to help with our messaging. We also need to start working with clinicians and healthcare organizations, sort of the classic term that people in science are using, the benchtop to bedside practices. We need to link what we're learning in the lab to a real life clinical scenario. We also need to work with our industry partners. And this is something, this is absolutely a symbiotic relationship. In order for us to say what healthy hydration is, we need to understand hydration health, right? We can't tell people what they should be drinking and how much and when if we don't have the science to back it up. So there's really the symbiotic relationship there. We also need to work with policymakers, because as we saw on the My Plate graphic, there's not enough information about water. And that's not the only place that we could use policy changes, but that's just an example. And then, as I mentioned, the communications and marketing teams, spreading this message. So I'm going to leave you really with the thought that in this country, we, for the longest time, we had thought about increasing lifespan, and we did that tremendously so in the early 1900s through things like diet. But now we're getting to this point where we probably can move that needle a little bit if we wanted to, if we want to live a little bit longer. But perhaps more importantly is the number of years that we live in good health, and that's health span. And that's really what we're trying to attack first and foremost, is reducing our risk to not only improve our quality of life, but also the quality of life for those around us in terms of how we influence economics, et cetera. So that's really the Hydration Health Center. We're already well on our way to becoming the leading authority on hydration health from groundbreaking research. And I do have our website there at the bottom. And that's all I have for you at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Colleen. Now we're going to transition to Elizabeth Pender, our next speaker for this session. Elizabeth is a dedicated advocate for community well-being with nearly 30 years of experience in the hospitality industry. She brings a passion of service and commitment to giving back to the communities that support us. As founder of the Caramel Connections Foundation, she has spearheaded initiatives to enhance community wellness, combat food insecurity, and promote healthy living through projects like the Seeds of Joy Community Garden. Her leadership has garnered numerous accolades and recognition. So please welcome Elizabeth Pender, the Executive Director of Caramel Connections Foundation.
Good morning, and thank you. So we've heard the science behind hydration and learned how water is sourced. But what happens when that water finally, oh, wait, I don't see my slides. I'm sorry. Here we go.
There you go.
Excellent. Thank you. So yes, again, we've heard how the science behind hydration, and we've also learned how Niagara sources water. But what happens when that water finally reaches the household? That's where I come in. As the executive director of Caramel Connections, our work is rooted in families where they are, um, at the table, in the garden, and in the community. Spaces to make hydration part of the everyday life. So I'll skip to this one because we jumped to the slide I wasn't ready for it, but that's okay. Our journey began in the kitchen, where cooking was a way of healing and connecting with our community. As Caramel Connections grew, so did our mission to make hydration and nutrition accessible, relevant, and culturally informed. Through partnerships with organizations like American Beverage Association and Niagara, we've expanded our impact, ensuring families have the knowledge and resources to make healthier choices. So you'll see in the timeline, we were founded in 2016, and then we were invited to have an MOU with ABA, the American Beverage Association, and partnered with them with their Balanced Calorie Initiative, which I'm sure everyone in this conversation is familiar with. Through that partnership, we were introduced to Niagara, and that partnership that took place 2018, and we've been growing strong ever since. With a partnership through the City of Ontario, we took an unused area and converted it into the Seeds of Joy Community Garden. As you know, at that time, that was when COVID was hitting. So it was really important that people had spaces where they can gather, but not be impacted by spreading the disease, because we didn't know what was happening. So Niagara partnered with us and has been able to help us to share knowledge in that space. I'll go a little further later. Our hydration efforts have expanded in 2024 when we partnered with Niagara and Feed the Children, and we were able to directly impact 1,000 individuals at one event, and that was one of our bigger accomplishments. And today, here we are, 2025, and through our Environmental 101, and through Cal State San Bernardino, I graduate with the MPH this coming Saturday. We were able to use, thank you. We were able to use this project, the Seeds of Joy, and do a program evaluation as part of my thesis. So it's been a great journey. It feels like it was only 2 years, but I can't believe, looking at the timeline, how quickly 10 years almost can go. So next slide, please. So from the Seeds of Joy project to our peer-led hydration model, we've built an approach in the classrooms, in the gardens, and then we just meet people where they are, whether they're in my restaurant or at a community engagement event. And as our past speaker just mentioned, the social determinants of health, a lot of times the conversation regarding that is focused on food access, healthcare, and housing, but hydration equity is often left out of the conversation, even though it deeply shapes health outcomes. You can go to the next slide, please. Hydration in the real world, what families see, hear, and experience every day. This is an example of a partnership that we have with Upland Unified School District, where we came in and we partnered and facilitated. We curated about, I think it's 5 sessions, workshops that we did with the parents and the children, because if you just teach one generation, it's not going to impact the whole family. So you have to do it where it's part of their daily conversation together, let them have some autonomy over it, especially the younger participants. So let's be real, health decisions aren't made in research papers, even though I love them, and I'm sure most of us love them. They're made in everyday moments, at the dinner tables, in conversations at the stores, and online. TikTok, not in textbooks, influence the decisions of most individuals. Sugary drinks are culturally normalized, often marketed as convenient or fun. Hydration must be simple. Hydration education must be simple, relatable, and consistent to be effective. That's why at CCF, we integrate healthy hydration into our nutrition and gardening community outreach efforts, rather than treating it as a standalone concept. Next slide, please. At CCF, we don't just talk about hydration, we make it accessible. As you can see, this graphic is showing you a couple of ways that we make that, we succeed with that. By building trust through our community events, we provide free access to water, whether it's at the garden, whether it's a workshop in a classroom, or at a public engagement partnership event. And we also do it through nutrition, as I mentioned, in regards to our cooking demonstrations and wellness fairs. So whether we're in the garden making homemade pizza in our pizza oven, or an elegant workshop where It's a plated opportunity. It's always, I love the branding that Niagara has. No matter what the occasion, it always works. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've done is we've partnered with, and you can see in this slide, it's hydration in action, the whole new wellness. In regards to knowing what people know, you have to ask, you have to get data. So on the table, you'll see there's a pre-survey. We've partnered with community aligned physicians as well as IHP, Niagara, and a few other partners to create the Wellness Collective. And through the Whole You Wellness program, we offer a 12-week program where we engage families, individuals, and they learn how water directly impacts their body through having it. Our partners donate lab services. So from the beginning, their blood is drawn so that they can see what their numbers mean. We partner with it. We execute the Know Your Numbers campaign on steroids. So pretty much they get to see exactly how their sleep, water intake, food, nutrition, everything is impacting their body. And by the end, they're a lot more knowledgeable. We're more knowledgeable because we've done pre and post surveys, and we're able to determine if our efforts are making a difference. It's not a weight loss program, but it does help them to make healthier decisions. So with trusted physicians, families hear the science of hydration in everyday life through the pre-surveys. We get to see their real hydration behaviors, ensuring education is personalized and water is the norm. It's integrated in every session from the moment families walk in. This is what health equity, in our opinion, looks like in action. Next slide. I'm sorry. So making health hydration a family and community norm, just like we did inside of the wellness, the Whole You Wellness program. You can see these are some images of the garden. The one to the left is where we had about 200 participants join us for a huge community meal. I'm not sure if you can really see it, but water is there as the beverage of choice. We, in the center, again, when you teach them that they don't have to have sugary drinks as the only alternative, that you can infuse it with fresh things that they've grown, they tend to consume more when they play a role in it. So whether it's cucumbers, oranges, strawberries, whatever the case, that they can maximize their water intake by just simple changes of incorporating their favorite fruits into it. So we don't push change, we model it, normalize it. When hydration shows up in daily life, it becomes second nature by making it accessible at all of our events and cooking demos, not just in health discussions. The third slide is where we partner with the Divine Nine, and when they have all of their youth programs, so that's going to be the African American fraternities and sororities, and we use our spaces to be able to impact families in different ways. So because each approach is not going to work for each, you have to do different things to approach different people. And we found that this approach works when you're providing it and making it accessible and not making it a mandatory thing, from us saying, do this or you won't be healthy. So in partnership with Niagara, the Balanced Calorie Initiative, and obviously with our nonprofit, it takes a collaborative effort. We can't do this work on our own. And so we don't just need more hydration education. We need more systems that reflect lived realities of family. So next slide, please. We need to build a culture of health one sip at a time, making water the default, not an afterthought, by empowering families, have more systems where there are more workshops available to parents to help them to model healthy behaviors, because kids mirror what they see. We need to ensure that trusted hydration is available in every zip code, and that zip codes don't decide health. Where children live should never dictate their access to healthy water. Hydration is a fundamental public health issue, and it's time we treat it as such. Next slide, please. I went through that. I don't know if I might sped through. But This work is not just about one organization, it's a collaboration, grassroots leadership, and policy shifts. So thank you for allowing me to join the conversation and for recognizing that hydration equity is health equity.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Does anybody have any questions that we can answer?
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Sorry. Did you tell me about consuming too much water? This is ages ago. I was told I could lose weight if I intook a lot of water, and by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I felt loopy. How does that happen?
So Colleen, you want to take that one?
I'd love to, thank you. And that's a wonderful question. And to be honest, I mean, it's more common for people to be underhydrated than overhydrated, but it is possible. So we need to make sure that we're educating on that too. So, I mean, most of the time we see the overhydration situation and it being not good for our health in very particular situations. More often than not, it's with recreational athletes who are doing like big events, like marathons and things like that. And so one of the things that they don't realize is exactly how much they're sweating. One of the other challenges and why it's probably not as much of an issue for people going about their daily lives is that hydration is really actually, and I didn't get have time to get into this, but it's not just drinking water, it's also the particles that we consume in our diet as well that helps us retain that water. And so if we don't intake those particles, and they're things like fats, proteins, carbohydrates, but also minerals, especially electrolytes like sodium, chloride, potassium, all those, if we're not taking those in regularly, we do get out of balance. And that's where the overhydration thing comes into play. So as long as you're eating regular meals, it's probably not going to be as much of an issue. But the thing that we always tell people is look at your urine color. It's not perfect, but it is a darn good indicator for most people on a daily basis. So what we always say is we're never shooting for clear. That is something that I think a lot of people assume. It should be light yellow.
Thank you.
Yeah, John Sweatman, Opelika, Alabama. Quick question, adding additives to your water, like an herbal mix or something of that nature, does that change the nature of how you absorb the water?
I don't know if this is for me. Or...
I think, Colleen, we could both, but you have the science behind it. So I'm thinking,
Okay.
Colleen, you should take it.
Whenever you like.
I'm learning as we go as well.
Okay. So good question. I would say the only time it's going to influence how we metabolize that water is if we add those electrolytes or if we add carbohydrate, or now some of the newer science is looking into certain amino acids or things that make up proteins as well. So if we're adding herbal things or, things like lemon or something like that, it's not necessarily playing a role in how we metabolize that water. But the other side of this is it making it more palatable? Does that increase water intake? Then in that case, it influences the whole water balance equation. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Elizabeth.
No, that's why we recommend that they infuse it, because we find that some people say, oh, I don't like the taste of water. And so to combat that, we're like, okay, so what's your favorite flavor when you drink your sodas? So you like strawberry soda at 250 calories per bottle? Let's switch that up to fresh slices, and then they get it. You can still, everything in moderation. So
Yeah. And you get some vitamins along the way.
exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or any questions online? No? All right, so thank you very much. Wanted to thank Dr. Coleen Muños and Elizabeth Fender for being our speakers today and sharing such valuable information. Thank you very much.
So
Thank you for having us.
You know,